This morning I would like to present Mason Meheri. He is the Chief Digital Officer of the company called Etion. And Etion is truly a South African company in the digital space. It's listed in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. And the logo of the company is Advancing Humanity Through Technology. And today's topic is Fourth Industrial Revolution. And I would like Mason to introduce himself further and take us through the Fourth Industrial Revolution. Mason, welcome.
Thanks, Milo. And thanks, good morning, everybody. So what I'd like to achieve today is I want to teach you a little bit of how to think in this new environment that's happening to us. Hence, the title of the slide is Get Ready for Anything, because it really is happening. I think one of the most important things is I don't want you to be surprised by things that are going to be happening in the next few years, and that's really what we're going to focus on. So just to start with, in many places in my own working environment, I don't encourage my colleagues to tell people they're engineers. Because we work in an IT environment where most people of the customer side are not engineers, and we don't want to seem that we are uppity when we're saying we're engineers. But in this environment, I can actually tell you that I am an engineer, and I'm quite proud of it. So my field of engineering is not civil engineering. It's actually electronic engineering. And what happened to me during my career, as in many others, is that life happens and you switch fields. And I actually went into computer engineering instead of electronic engineering. So I'll give you a minute there just to read my little joke about computer engineers. And then you'll see it's a very different world that we find ourselves in. So when I went into computer engineering, the first thing that I saw, do not model anything before they build it. Can you believe it? They just wing it. That is how this industry works. So that's one of the things you're going to have to get used to is now that we are all becoming digital businesses and computer-driven businesses, there's different kinds of thinking coming in which are not the typical engineering process. So you've got to get used to that. They hide it with things like agile and all these kind of words. You're going to hear acronyms. The computing industry makes up new words when they want to sell anything. That's the funniest thing in the world, and you're going to have to start getting used to this stuff just like I did many years back. So I thought I'd go back a little bit and tell you about myself. I want to tell you about a life-changing thing that happened to me when I was exposed to the Fourth Industrial Revolution the first time, and it was still when I was at university. So that was many years back. So what happened was I was relatively good at the computer science part of electronic engineering. I didn't really have great difficulty in that, which meant I was bored in class most of the time because my marks were very good in that specific subject. So in order to make up some fun for myself in the class, what I turned to was I became naughty. So I thought what would be a great idea is I'm going to invent a fake student. I'm going to call him James Bond. And his student number is going to be 007. And I'm going to start filling in assignments and exams and everything for this fake student as well, just for a bit of a laugh for myself. So I did my own work, filled in my own assignments, did my own tests, and I did a whole other person's work and filled in assignments, and I wrote a whole lot of nonsense as well. So I was busy doing that to entertain myself. What I didn't know is the professor that was giving computer science, and that is him to the right. We're still friends to this day. So that is Professor Johan Holm. He moved from University of Pretoria to Potch University. What I didn't know is he was a pioneer in neural technology, neural networks. He was busy building machine learning. He was busy experimenting with this at the time. So what he was doing was he was feeding all these tests and assignments in, and I was disguising my handwriting. He was feeding this into the self-learning program. Think of the monster of all if-then-else statements. He was feeding it into this program until eventually he had a 99.7% certainty that the delinquent James Bond was myself. So I walked into class one day and he said to the whole class, probably 400 students that were there, I would like you to introduce you to James Bond. And I thought this should be good. And he said, Mason Meheri, please stand up. And I thought, oh my word, I'm going to be kicked out of university now. So he saw me afterwards. Now that's a strange thing to start my talk off with. But I want to tell you the consequence on my marks for the rest of the year. So he treated it as a bit of a laugh, thank goodness for me. But my marks were good, which always helps. So when we did our projects for the year, we had to do a programming exercise where we had to do number plate recognition. And what everybody else did is you separated the characters on the number plate. And then the easy way to do that is you make a matrix around each letter. And you look at the ratio of black to white pixels around each letter. And you'll say that kind of a J has got this ratio of black to white. That's the easy way to do that quickly. And that's what most people did. It's not that accurate because a J and a 2 kind of have the same ratio of black to white in that thing, you know. So got to be a bit more sophisticated. What I did is I took his neural network engine and I made a lot more work out of it, but I got my program to 5 minutes before adjudication, learn new fonts. And it was quite amazing because when it came time to mark my assignment, not only could I do the South African number plate for Gauteng or Transvaal at the time, but I could do any number plate in the world. And that for me was the aha moment. It was like, wow, you know, this was actually really powerful. You know, so that was a strange start to a very good outcome for me. And it really shows I've got a love for this kind of digitalization and the technologies that's happening now. And I hope to share some of that with you today. So the business that I'm from, Etion, is not really well known to most people outside of the electronics industry. But we are, amongst other things, a local electronics manufacturer. So I just want to show you a little bit of some of the tech that we're involved in so you can understand where I'm coming from. So we have local manufacturing capability. You see there, some of it is some of the automated production lines. We also have people that do some soldering and repairs and some of the larger components. But we can manufacture basically military spec equipment. We do a lot of things in defense, but also health and safety. Some of the devices at the bottom there on the extreme left, you'll see some of the mining equipment, for example. Those are gas detectors, which will measure different kinds of poisonous gases, the miner's exposure to that, and potentially save lives. Collision avoidance things. So we are playing in this world of IoT and sensors and things like that in various ways. I think one of the interesting areas, and I'll draw down from some of those examples, is that we also touch in the military space. You know, so this is not something that we really talk about a lot, but military really pays for tech advancement. That is a fact. It has happened in every single war where you've seen a great advancement in technology as there's actually been a war. But what happens during a war is somebody pays somebody to research, you know, so it's a great drive of new technology. So you'll see there's some of the electronics components. We don't do munitions at all, but you'll see some of the electronic circuit boards over there, some of the surveillance equipment. That helmet there is the British Aerospace Striker helmet. So we do components of the Eurofighter program from South Africa, which no one knows, which I think is quite interesting. And at the top is something shooting off countermeasures with some firing circuitry. So again, the reason I'm putting this up is because it's quite a testing ground for new technology coming out. You know, the military complex definitely pays for a crazy amount of R&D. Maybe a little bit closer to home, and really a subject that I'm more expert in, and I want to share with you more today, is around the issue of digitalization and cybersecurity, which is a big and very important area of the fourth industrial revolution. So some of the places where you have interacted as South African citizens with us before, and you may not know it, is around your ID card, for example. So we do the digital security and the digital identity on every single ID card that's there. It has your fingerprints on it. It's got a digital certificate on it. It can create digital signatures. So it's something that we are proud of having a part of, and it's something that's been a great success for the country so far. Around birth and death certificates, the population register, there's a huge amount of security applied to that system to stop the threat from insiders. You know, everybody's aware that there can be hackers from the outside, but we also stop the threat from insiders in these systems. And over the years, we've been very successful in stopping that kind of insider compromise and also protecting the good people. So if you have interacted with the Department of Home Affairs in this country, you have interacted with us in some way as well. I'll immediately say if it's a good experience, then that was us, definitely. So we play in crypto. We'll talk a little bit about that when there's questions. You know, we can talk about some of the security. I'm going to end up with some of the security concepts. But these are places where you've probably interacted with us before and you haven't known it. Now, when I was preparing for this talk and just thinking about the landscape and what everybody knows about the fourth industrial revolution, it's often quite simplified. You know, I think, in fact, it's often oversimplified. What I like looking at is how the World Economic Forum has painted out the fourth industrial revolution. And you'll see a huge amount of complexity in issues that have to be dealt with to deal with these changes in technology, but more importantly, changes in society. Now, it's very difficult to see what's going on over there, but I'd actually encourage you to go and look, if you look anywhere, is to read some of the World Economic Forum literature that they have on the fourth industrial revolution. I want to call out a couple there. So obviously, we're very focused on the disruption in jobs and skills. You know, we are looking at innovation and productivity. I think what everybody expects you to talk about is disruption that's happening in the industry. And I guarantee you I will not use Uber as an example. Oh, wait, I just did. Sorry. Agile governance, security and conflict, business disruption, fusing technologies, ethics and identity. And then around that, each one has got a huge amount of subtopics. So this was when we were preparing for the session before, why I was saying that this could actually be a series of 40 lectures dealing with each one of these issues. So what I very quickly did is I just chose a few of those that I want to talk about today and maybe share some examples with you. And really my objective of today is to just show you a different way of thinking about this. You know, it's not a scary part of our history. It really is not. We were chatting earlier during the breakfast and we were saying, you know, 30, 40 years ago, people were still saying the machines are going to take over and we're going to lose our jobs and everything, and it never really happened. It's just we evolved. Things changed a little bit, and that's exactly what we're going through now. You know, so I'm going to take a couple of these concepts and I'm going to talk a little bit about that. And then afterwards we'll end up with more the digitalization aspect of fourth industrial revolution, because that is affecting your business now. If you can have digital mining, then you definitely should have digital civil engineering as well. You know, so let's talk about that. So first off, I think the most important thing to understand is why this is so scary and why this change is happening and why the world feels that it's going so crazy, is that we are moving from a world defined by scarcity to a world defined by abundance. Now let's explore that for a little bit. It's a concept that's propagated by Singularity University, but it's actually very interesting to think about. Our whole world has been built up in the past, our structures that we have around scarcity. So I was thinking of a personal example. How can I demonstrate this change that has happened in a way that is close to home for me, but that you would understand as well? And one of the things that I really enjoy doing is I'm a keen amateur photographer. So if you look at the way the rules were defined around scarcity, a lovely example is how cameras used to work. And that was actually my pride and joy camera, Pentax K1000. Absolutely loved that camera. And that is what I really learned photography on. But if you think of the whole way we handled those cameras, it was an incredibly valuable piece of equipment. The film was very expensive. And therefore, everybody didn't take photos. Because in order not to waste money, you had to spend money in educating yourself. You had to really learn what you were doing. You had to understand the triad of aperture, shutter speed, and ISO of the film. Otherwise, your exposure would be wrong, and you'd make a very expensive mistake. You know, it's quite amazing to see the quality of photos that came from 20 years ago, before we had digital cameras with image stabilization and all these things. It really was an art form. You really had to study a lot. Now, just imagine immediately what the world is like now. Every single person now thinks they're a photographer, because now it's just become abundant. You know, the technology to take photos is in your hand. You've got it over here, and it is virtually free. So therefore, you can take 1,000 photos, and you can throw away the ones that didn't work. You don't really have to understand what's going on. You just keep on taking photos until you get one that works. So in a small microcosm, that is explaining what has actually happened with the world. The problem, though, now that people have is slightly different. Because we are working in this era of abundance, now people don't know what to do with their photos. Where do they put these hundreds of photos that they took of breakfast and their friends and their outings and all these things, of their feet when they're lying on the beach? I mean, good grief, can you believe that, you know? So where do you put these photos? How do you sort through all of these things, and how do you find something when you're looking for it? So there already is a big part of the story, you know. So the same concept's still there, but a radical thing has actually changed, you know. The way we are doing photography now is totally different, thanks to the technology that's changed, and it's become abundant. You know, the price has just fallen away. So it brings us to an interesting point to acknowledge, is that there's this thing that's emerged called the doubling theory. You know, in IT, in computer science, we used to talk a lot about Moore's law, and that was the more transistors you're making, the more computing power is going to increase or double every 18 months. But if you think about it, and there's a lot of examples to that effect, and I'm sorry, that joke is for you, because it's a bit of a weak joke for so early in the morning, but I'm going to get to that point in a second now. So the thing that's happened over time is that every 2 years, performance of technology actually doubles and the price is halving. And that is not just a computer thing. That is happening to technology across the board. You know, if you go back many years to when they started mapping the human chromosome, DNA mapping, when they started doing that stuff, I can't remember the exact figures, but let's say the first time anybody did it, it probably took 10 years to do, and it probably cost $5 billion to do. I'm making up the numbers slightly, but it was kind of that magnitude, you know. But in 2 years' time, it took 5 years to do that mapping, and it cost $5 billion. In 2 years' time, it probably took a year to do that mapping, and it cost less than $1 billion. And so on, until now, you can map somebody's DNA probably in about 10 minutes, and it probably costs you a couple of $100. So the disruption caused by this new technology is actually not new. It's just the price point has changed because the technology has become faster, more powerful, and cheaper. And if you are watching that space, if you're seeing that evolution happening, you would be at a point where you could say, I can see that in 2 years' time, I'll actually be able to use this in my industry and my business. So there's the second big message for you out of the talk, is you've got to be observant of these things that are going on. And even things that seem like a crazy idea or way too expensive will not be a crazy idea and way too expensive in 2 or 4 or 8 years' time. You know, it's just not going to be. So we've got to look at the world with new eyes. Now, why I had the wind on there is on the topic of renewable energy. So an interesting one where you can see this happening right now is with solar power. You know, so we can prophesize that looking at the rate of change in solar power, that probably within the next 15 to 20 years, we will be able to get the world's energy requirement from solar power alone. I mean, isn't that a fascinating thing to think about? You know, if you think if the world's energy requirement can come from solar power alone, how is that going to change the political structures in the world? Not having a dependence on oil potentially, not having a dependence on transmission lines at all. It means that you can get communications and education to anywhere at any time, no matter where they are on the globe. It's a huge thing to think about. And that is why there's such a big drive, but also such a big resistance against renewable energy. So the fact is that you cannot slow it down. So even if organizations want to stop this, this is going to happen anyway. I just put that up because that's my favorite picture of a solar power plant. You know, it's intended to be a bit of an eco-tourist attraction as well. But this thing is real and it is happening. The research in batteries, probably lagging about 5 to 10 years behind the research in solar, but you can actually see how this thing is changing. You know, the fact that even in South Africa, we now have launches of fully electric cars shows you that the quick charge ability of modern batteries is good enough that it can be your day-to-day commute. You can plug in for half an hour, get more than half a battery charge, and be good to go for a couple of 100 Ks again. You know, it's quite fascinating what's happening. So I think this is a big point to take home with you, is that keep watching the technology and remember that everything is getting more powerful and cheaper every single day, and there will be opportunities for your business to benefit from things that it cannot use today, but definitely can use tomorrow. Now, if we keep on thinking along this line of abundance and scarcity, you'll actually see that there's probably going to be other changes that are happening. And if you look at the political structure of the world, you can actually see that these things are starting to hurt now. You know, there has to be changes that's happening. If you look at our system of government, for example, which is a representative democracy, you know, it's quite interesting that a lot of the world follows the system of representative democracy. That's not me, and I'm not doing anything, so I'm not sure where it's going. So a lot of the world follows this representative democracy because it was intended to give you as a citizen a say in the laws that are made and how your country is actually run. And you can represent that by your sphere of influence, which kind of filters down. Is you, an individual, have got your own thoughts. In your home, basically, there's a voting system that's happening inside your home. And I'm not going to say whose vote wins in the home, but you understand what's happening there. That then goes into voting in a community. And the whole idea was to get your say to people that are very far removed from you, because we had a scarcity of communications. And so it would keep on trickling down until your representative for your city was part of choosing the representative for your province or your state, which is part of choosing the representative for national government who can then talk to the president. So just think about that. That whole system of representative government came from a scarcity of communications. That was a way to get everybody's thinking from the whole country to filter up into the legislative process. Now think today if that is still necessary. Really, if the president of this country would like to know what we all think, they can find out immediately, because the communication systems that we now have are totally abundant. It is virtually free. We still complain about it and say, but it's easy. Everybody has it. Everybody has social media. They've got the tools. They've got the mobile phones with them the whole time. So actually, instead of having this very bloated political structure where you are talking to somebody, to talk to somebody for you, to talk to somebody for you, to talk to somebody for you, is actually that whole thing is not necessary anymore. Because in an instant, you can know what everybody in the country thinks. It is theoretically possible that we can vote on issues every single day. There's no reason why that can't happen across the world. Now, again, the institutions wouldn't like that at all. So there's a change process that we're going through. But I wanted to illustrate to you some of the concepts, and this is why we are feeling a lot of pain in the world at the moment, is because there's a conflict with the abundance that we have now, with the structures and designs that we have, which are based on scarcity. And I hope that concept came out clearly when I'm explaining now. So I think that's an interesting thing to think about. I want to turn the discussion a little bit more to some of the tech pillars, though, and slightly away from some of the psychological, political aspects. And when you start looking at fourth industrial revolution, you'll pretty much come up with the same things which are shaking the world at the moment. Cloud computing, mobile technologies, machine-to-machine, 3D printing, advanced robotics, big data analytics, Internet of Things, RFID technologies, cognitive computing, and then cybersecurity, which is an area that I spend a lot of my time in. So I thought I'd take a few of these things again and just illustrate some of the things that is coming out with the research that's busy happening and some of the new ways of thinking. So one of the places that I can start is in our own business. We manufacture sensors and measurements and control systems and things like that you're familiar with in the engineering world. And one of the things that we pride ourselves on is that we can make sensors that can measure the temperature of a bearing inside a wheel, like on a train, and potentially stop a derailment, prevent a derailment from happening and save lives and save a lot of money. So that's one of the things we pride ourselves on. And because our group's focus is on safety and productivity, we put a lot of emphasis in these things. So this is part of the Internet of Things world, which is quite interesting. We used to call it measurements and control systems, telemetry. Now everybody's calling it IoT, because the idea is that you can have very small sensors everywhere, and because of the abundance of communication, you can communicate small quantities of data over very great distances, and these things can be talking to you the whole time. Now what I like doing is, this is our way of thinking, but if you look through patents that are being filed, you'll see a much more interesting thing when it comes to sensors. And I apologize for the heading. I try to say it as plainly as I could. This is a patent that Google has actually filed, which is sensors that would go into a smart bathroom and even inside the toilet bowl. Okay, even inside the toilet bowl. Now, why would anybody on earth want to do that? And actually, if you think about it, what a fantastic medical tool to actually take ongoing measurements inside somebody's house when they are living day by day. You want to take blood sugar measurements, take it every single day over a period of time, you're going to get the right measurement. If you want to see what's going on in somebody's body, when doctors have tried everything else and they don't know, what do? They take a stool sample. Because what's going in your gut is actually your health. It is the absolute way to tell what kind of bacteria is going, what's going on in the body. It's absolutely genius to go and do something like this. There are applications for general health, but there's applications for senior citizens, for example, where somebody may not actually be talking to the outside world anymore, and you can measure what's going on in their lives and in their health, and you can alert medical professionals or alert their family. So isn't that a fascinating twist on sensor technology, that we know we can make sensors for everything, but it's applied in a way that we've never thought of before. So I thought that was an absolutely great example. I want to bring it a little bit close to some of the military technology again. And I know some of you have got an interest in drones, for example. So maybe it's a controversial heading because I specifically titled that Ancient Warfare. So we've been using drones in battle for quite a long time now. It makes it a lot safer. Even the way the dynamics of how they fly is very different. The fuel used, very different, so you can deliver munitions from quite a long way away. But I'll say that's ancient technology because the miniaturization that's busy happening is opening up new possibilities. So this is a new military drone ordered by the US military so that they can actually give these to individual soldiers that they can have a view of what's going on in the battlefield. So it's an autonomous, artificially intelligent miniature drone that can fly around and can do recon for people without them going in harm's way. And you can actually immediately see that thing will be very difficult to spot. It'll be very difficult to see. So it's a tiny little thing, doesn't make much noise, and this is going to be actually issued to soldiers so that they can do recon ahead and see what's going on. So that kind of is a modern warfare look at the moment. There's other things happening in this drone kind of world. We have got things like loitering munitions. It is a bomb with wings and a small propeller that can be dropped above a battlefield, and then it will actually loiter around and fly around by itself, avoiding things and waiting for a signal until it says you are targeted to go and fall in this area. So the planes that are dropping these bombs can drop them and leave, and the bomb won't fall on the ground. It's going to hang around for a while. I mean, isn't that a strange concept to think about? And these things are being powered by artificial intelligence. But where it's going to is actually quite frightening. You take these miniaturized, artificially intelligent drones, and you drop them in swarms. Because now it is almost impossible to defend against this thing. So instead of having one missile coming in that you can actually shoot against, each one of those little drones can be fitted with explosives. It could be a small cartridge that's being fired, or it could just be a straight explosive. And the swarm could attack an installation or attack people even, and it is almost impossible to defend against things because there's going to be thousands, as you've just seen, and it's a totally different way of doing warfare. So this is one of the areas where artificial intelligence, autonomous units, low frequency or low bandwidth communications, if necessary, are being applied in a way that the world has never seen before. We see there's tenders now from Raytheon, for example, to develop thousands of little self-destructive drones that can go and attack these drones and try and knock them out the air. I mean, it's science fiction stuff, and it's actually busy happening today. So it's very real. So I wanted to give you a little bit of a view of the change of thinking that has to happen in every single one of us. I want to show you a little bit of how innovative companies are applying these technologies and changes of thinking. But I'm going to bring it a little bit closer to your business. And I'll talk about digitalization and cybersecurity in each one of our businesses. So what we have seen is that if you want to survive in these times, you have to have an agile business. You have to move quickly. You've got to be more responsive. And the customer definitely has to be satisfied. And your customers, doesn't matter which field of business you're in, are used to a different way of working because the customers are used to instant gratification. They're used to convenience. They're used to doing things quickly. And they're expecting you, as their service providers or engineering providers, to be behaving the same way as their interaction with Amazon, for example, when they're online. So we see a lot of focus on onboarding activities in businesses, where you have to sign up new customers, sign up employees, sign up suppliers, sign up devices. But what the world is looking for in this age of fourth industrial revolution is that first word, is easy. So what the world is shopping for is easy. So the days of voluminous paperwork and copies of IDs and all these things, it just doesn't fit in the world that we have right now anymore. We have devices over there because the whole computing infrastructure as we know it has already changed. We often talk about the fact that this is a much stronger computer than the first computers that actually launched a man on the moon, put a man on the moon, and that's true. But we have these computers that are coming into our environments. We have the dematerialization or virtualization of servers. So we used to have physical servers, then we had virtual machines. Now the virtual machines are broken up in subcomponents, which we call containers. So I've literally seen it in our own business, where we issue SSL certificates, the little yellow padlocks, to banks, for example, which proves the site's identity on the internet, that website really belongs to a bank. Years back, we used to get 4 days in order to check the domain names and make sure that we were issuing that digital certificate to the new bank. In today's world of DevOps and SecDevOps, programmatically, the developers will build up a whole new banking system over a few minutes. I think we now get 90 seconds to issue a real SSL certificate, to do all our checks and things, issue a real SSL certificate, so that the new build of the banking system can be tested and it can be released into production. Literally, that's how quickly it's happening. So this automation has already affected the way we do things, because we needed to automate as well. Otherwise, we wouldn't have survived in that world. We then go to the next part of what follows onboarding activities is always some sort of contracting. And again, you can think of your own businesses and how you apply that. But what the world is looking for is a convenient way to contract, and it has to be electronic. So companies don't want to print, scan, couriers, paper storage. What I don't even have on there is data capture errors. There's a whole lot of reasons why we are moving to this paperless society. I've been saying it for years, but these days there are things like advanced electronic signatures, which gives you a legally credible alternative to a handwritten signature, especially if you are signing in a professional capacity. In fact, it'll protect you more than what a handwritten signature would have. So these things were not around 10 years ago, but they are now. So it's an essential piece of the puzzle in order to move your business forward. Now again, that kind of information gathering, contracting, leads you to looking after the information. So I've labeled it there private communication, but you would have heard in the press that in South Africa we've got POPI, but worldwide, which has been quite earth-shattering, is that the first fines have been handed out for GDPR, the General Data Protection Regulations of the EU. So if you are interacting with EU citizens, then those laws apply to your business as well. And it means that we have to be responsible in looking after information that's given to us. We can still process it, but we've got to understand what we're doing and we've got to look after it. And that immediately involves encryption. So we are looking at securing networks. Securing email. I mean, email is used so casually. It is unbelievable. Everybody forgets that an email could actually be evidence in a court case. So before we used to write a business letter, we used to say, "Dear sirs," or "to whom it may concern." Now it is, "How's it, my brew?" And we write this thing. It's just become so casual and so sloppy when you're talking with these casual communication mechanisms. So I understand that there's viewers watching from other places in the world, so I'm going to translate that quickly and just say, "Hey brother, how's it going?" That really is not language that you want to use in business communications at all. So securing these emails, one is making people aware that it's actually a business communications tool, but the second one is giving them easy tools to use to encrypt the information. If you don't give it to people in an easy way, they're not going to use it. We're looking at securing transactions. I have the SSL example there. It's required outside your business and even inside your business these days, because the boundaries of our businesses have disappeared. We are making use of cloud computing. There's another fourth industrial revolution word there, is that the data center has actually become virtual as well. You know, you don't know where that data center is. You're consuming services from all over the world. So encrypting that, knowing where the site is that you're talking to, SSL has become an essential tool for that. And then things like secure chat. You know, it's actually quite worrying the amount of sensitive conversations in governments that happen over mechanisms that that government has got no control of the security over. You know, and I'm not saying WhatsApp is good or bad. I'm just saying if you're a government and you're doing very sensitive things, you should be asking these questions. You know, who actually owns the server that I'm busy using in this communication? So as long as you apply your mind and you understand what you're doing, you're okay. But if you don't know this and you don't think about it, then you're not okay in your business. And then finally, we are going into frictionless transacting and approvals. And that frictionless is a very important word. You've seen it in the banking system today. You know, people just don't go into branches anymore because interacting with the apps and with a website is a frictionless experience for them. And you, I'm sure, in your individual capacities, far rather enjoy doing banking at home than you do going to a branch. That is why you are seeing bank branches closing. That's the one example that is not related to our economy. You know, they're closing because people don't want to go to branches anymore. They want to rather use the electronic channels. It's how we think these days. You know, and I'm sure you prefer it as well. So frictionless transacting and approvals is really where we spend some time around the security. You know, we're looking at, in big projects, eradicating ghost workers that have crept in, quite often from insiders which have created these ghosts in the first place so that they can defraud an organization or a government, take the money. You know, there's frightening amounts of ghost workers in a lot of areas of industry as well as of government. So before you reduce the good staff, first have a look in your organization and see if there aren't any ghosts that you're paying for. We use concepts like time stamping so we don't have to inconvenience a user, but we can seal the transactions and potentially even put things in an evidence vault where they can never be hacked and never be altered. So that if you need that evidence, if you need that record, it will be there. It's one of the things that made blockchain so popular. The concepts inside blockchain are not that new. But the way they described Bitcoin and these things actually made the normal person out there understand what's going on. Instead of explaining hash-based or message digest-based digital signatures using asymmetric keys, they said the record is immutable. I mean, what genius to explain it so simply. You know, so immutable means it can never change. No one cares about the maths. Well, maybe engineers do, but no one cares about the maths. You know, the man in the street just doesn't care. They understand this thing is immutable. It is transparent. There's a copy that's going to last forever. You know, so these concepts are things that we should be applying in our own businesses. It doesn't have to be with blockchain, but the concepts are very good ones. And those concepts will replace the trustworthiness which you need in your business with some of these concepts. And really we can break down trust that you need in your business today as positive identity, and in all your interactions you require these things. Positive identity is not authentication. It is knowing who you're dealing with. It will involve some authentication. It's also going to involve some identification of people. But you must have positive identity. They must know who you are. You must know who they are. You must know that the machine you're working on is really the machine that your company wants you to work on. And I imagine virtual in the cloud. You need to know these things. If you have measurement and control systems out there, so you have an actuator that's working a valve, for example, that actuator needs to know that the signal coming to me to switch on or off is really coming from the control system that I should be listening to. You know, you need positive identity machine to machine. If you're going to upgrade the firmware in that device that's out there in the field, the device in the field needs to know that this firmware that's coming in is legit. I can actually test the authenticity and I can upgrade myself so that I can perform better. When you're getting information from sensors, you're sending them back, you need to know that you are listening to information from your sensors, you know, your IoT devices. So really positive identity is the foundation of surviving into the future. It's the foundation of trust that we need in systems. The next one up is on the people side, you need accountability. So people is still an essential element of the modern world. And I forecast that it's not going to change. You know, our roles may change, but we are building a society to serve ourselves, you know, so we are not going to engineer ourselves totally out of existence. You know, that just doesn't make sense for that to happen. But in order for business to be trustworthy, you must be able to hold people accountable. If we don't have the paper and the wet signatures, which are not that great anyway, if we don't have that anymore, you need alternative mechanisms that are standards-based and still fit in the legal framework to hold people accountable. It's where techniques like advanced electronic signatures, or in Europe, qualified signatures, come into play. And fortunately, these days, they are easy to get and easy to use. The next level up is integrity, data integrity specifically. I'd go so far as to say that it doesn't help that you have data if you are not sure of the integrity. The next great attacks that we are probably facing will be on data integrity. Everybody has heard about ransomware. You know, everybody's heard of this thing already. It's where you get malware, malicious software onto your machine. It locks all your content, and it's nice enough to tell you, you've got to pay me so many bitcoins if you want your data back. Why I say nice enough is because you should be making backups. So you should know that, okay? So it just pops up and it says, you've actually been affected, reload from your backup. It's a great thing. Can you imagine in a banking environment, if malware gets in the system and it does not tell them, and it just randomizes numbers all over the place? Can you imagine the impact on the world? So our systems are not designed for that level of data integrity, error correction inside the data inside the system, because we always assume that the server is a safe place. But now you don't know where the server is anymore, and you don't know who's talking to the server. So we've got to think about engineering systems that have got error correction in the data itself, even when it's stored and when you're processing it. And then finally, at the top of the pyramid for trust, we have privacy. You know, so we need to respect privacy, because with all this data being collected about ourselves as well, we have to make sure that we are responsible in using this information. You know, so that really is a model that I wanted to give to you, which is a non-technical, non-hype-driven model. Hopefully it makes sense. These are the business requirements behind information security in order to have trustworthiness in your business dealings. So there's no hype in there, there's no acronyms made in there, that is business language. It's things that you can take back and explain to your organization. Okay, so I think that's a very important one. I'm going to talk a little bit more about cybersecurity, though, just to illustrate what's happening in the world while we have this opportunity. And we often worry about hackers as threats. But I want to show you there's a couple of different types of threats out there that you don't really think about. So on the left, we've got the group which is known as hacktivists. So these are individuals that are anonymous that actually are fighting a social cause. They believe that they are doing the world a favor. They're doing a good thing in the world. They'll see an injustice and they'll break into something, steal information and publicize it so that they can solve this problem that they've seen happening. Now that is all fine and well if they have the whole picture and they really are acting justly. But it may be that they don't have the whole picture and they expose information that puts lives in danger. You know, so I'm not drawing a conclusion about that. I'm just saying that is the group called hacktivists. The next picture over there is my picture of criminals. Now, looking around the room here, I don't think there's going to be too many tattoos in the room. And I apologize for people with tattoos. It's just that's my picture for criminals, okay? I'm not, again, my children said I should find a better picture for criminals, but that's my picture for criminals, okay? It's my slideshow, so I can do what I want. So, crime in the computer space for money is a reality, and it's a big driver today. As our business processes and our money has dematerialized, and it's in this computer world, it is logical that crime has followed suit. The large organized crime syndicates employ computer professionals just like a normal business. They have to, because that is where the businesses will move to as well. You know, we're definitely seeing computer science graduates which are being employed in the criminal underworld. You know, it's quite unbelievable. So it is an absolute reality that there is crime for profit happening. A lot of these engagements are happening around the dark web, the hidden internet, where it's quite difficult to trace the origin of transactions, but they are really happening. We then have cyber terrorism. That's the picture for cyber terrorism. I don't have to say much more about that. And then we have rich countries, which is a concern for a lot of us. And that's just some famous faces that we put up there, because these are rich countries. They are much richer than our country. So we are seeing the use of hacking technologies to gather intelligence and also disrupt the processes in other countries. This is a reality today. A month or two ago, there was an exploit bought on the dark web. And I can't remember again the exact details, but it was an iOS exploit, so for an Apple phone, to break into a phone, and somebody paid about $2 million for this. Now, it's unlikely a criminal organization would pay that kind of money for an exploit which the second it's known, it's going to be patched anyway. The kind of people that have that kind of money is definitely military intelligence agencies. It's unlikely that it would have been anybody else that would buy an exploit that they know is only going to live a short while for that kind of cash so that they can go and gather a specific piece of intelligence. That must have been what happened there. So that is really the world that we worry about and that we think about a lot. There are also some threats in this new world where we've digitalized which we don't actually talk about. So my picture on the left is a disgruntled employee that is under a lot of financial pressure. And unfortunately, with the way the world economy is looking at the moment, is that there's a lot of those. It is a tough environment out there financially for individuals. And we sit with the sad fact that if individuals spot a lucrative opportunity, they can get away with something because they're anonymous, so the likelihood of getting away with it is high and the reward is high, they might be tempted to actually do the crime. So the insider threat has definitely changed. Somebody inside your organization, somebody with a business role, doing something in the line of duty that they are allowed to do, could create a fake beneficiary, a fake supplier, and pay them. And that is an insider threat as an example. And then, of course, we have the one on the right-hand side there, which is auditors. So I'm not saying that auditors are evil. I'm also not saying that they're not evil. But they're a reality that affects every single business. So it is like death and taxes, is you are going to be audited on an annual basis. So again, the fact that your business is digitalizing means that you've got to spend more time cleaning house on the inside, because the audit processes are going to start looking at your computing practices as well, including your information security governance, because it's such an important thing these days. And I bet you it's not something that you talk about, but it's something that has changed, and you've got to understand that, because the audits are going to start involving this as well. We've seen it in King. Computer security, that kind of information system security governance is part of good governance in a corporate these days. Okay, so that is busy happening. We mentioned earlier the computing power that's busy changed. So this was a picture of my favorite computer that I had. It was an IBM 486. And if I remember correctly, it still had a turbo button so it would go faster. It was absolutely mind-blowing. I really enjoyed that thing. Boy, I'm old, eh? So if I'm looking at one of you sitting in the room here. So for the rest of you, you make me feel like a young man. Thank you very much. So, but that was my favorite computer. I loved that. I did a lot of programming on that. Now, if you look at the size of computers, in the top picture over there, you'll see on the finger, there's an array of 100 computers which are more powerful than my 486 used to be. Can you believe that? So that on his finger, that is not one computer. That is 100 of them. If you look at them on sugar, on the right, you'll see one of those computers. Now that little speck over there is more powerful than what my favorite computer was when I was starting off. Isn't that unbelievable to actually see that? And then we've got the whole new generation of technology, because transistor technology just can't go faster anymore. We can't get rid of the heat buildup. So we've got quantum computing, which is busy happening now. Again, it's going to create great changes in the industry because of the ability to process so much quicker. It's going to change security algorithms as well, for that matter. But this is just a quick view of the evolution that's happening over there. So it's quite fascinating. Now, this technology is going to be there for you to use. Cloud computing systems are making use of better and better technology the whole time, but so are the bad guys. So they can also buy more and more computing power. they can also use cloud computing to have elastic computing systems to give them more power to attack somebody. It can definitely happen. Now we'll look at some well-known attacks that have happened in the past, and it's just interesting to see these things happening for real. So this one was the Petya attack that happened. So we can draw our own conclusions about who wanted to attack the Ukraine. Let's think about that for a second. Who's in the news the whole time wanting to attack the Ukraine? I'm not going to say it because I value my life too much. But what happened in this attack is there was a physical compromise of the update servers of the financial system that is used in the Ukraine. Okay, so somebody physically got into the update system because they know the software is self-updating, and they put malware in that, and that was distributed to every client that actually runs this. So the attack was focused on the Ukraine, probably intended to cripple their financial system. It had consequences beyond the attackers' wildest dreams because it affected the whole world. Because every single country that does business in the Ukraine is also running this software. Every company that does business there is running this software as well. And their software, I think they use it for customs and tax filing purposes. Their software was contaminated as well. You had huge organizations like shipping companies, for example, that were virtually paralyzed with their ships at sea, and they couldn't remotely reload these computers. They actually had to fly people out to get onto the ships to physically go and reload computers and start again. I mean, catastrophic damages from a targeted attack where a country was actually the victim, but the world actually hurt. I'm going to keep with the trend because I'm already now there. So these attackers that should not be named launched another attack in the Ukraine. So this was, you may have heard this word before, the Prikar-Pacha Oblenergo. Anybody heard that word before? It's a power station in the Ukraine, I believe. So what this attack was about was to actually attack the steel industry in the Ukraine. So again, over a period of time, there was a compromise not only of the power station coming in probably through a normal user that wanted to work remotely, and they opened a chink in the armor so that somebody could get in. So the power station was compromised, but the telecommunications network was compromised around it as well. Now, when the attack was finally launched, the target was the steel smelters that were in the area. So they first cut the comms, then they cut the power, so no one could phone and say, hey, the power is off. And eventually the objective of the attack was to get that iron to get hard in the smelters. Now, if you know that industry, you know when the power comes back on, if that stuff has got hard, you can't just turn it back on again and melt everything. It doesn't work like that. You throw away those smelters and you buy new ones. So a catastrophically expensive attack, very successfully executed. But these things are not these hard to do. It's not that hard to do because people don't think about the basics of security. To illustrate the point of people not thinking about it, I want to show you a hacking search engine. So this is not Google. This is a thing called Shodan, which helps you search for IoT devices. And I used it here to search for webcams that are open. So let me give you a quick security tip to use in your own business, in your own lives. Change the default password. Just think about that. Change the default password. What happens when you buy a video surveillance system, the thing comes with an admin password already on it. Quite often it's admin or something like that. And you leave that be. So if you use a search engine like this, you can see what kind of webcam or surveillance system is it. Then you go look on the manufacturer's website in the manual and you see what is the default password that it ships with, and you try it, and most likely you're going to get in. Now, my point I wanted to make here is that people don't think about these things. So I did a search like this. I found a manufacturing facility where I could then actually log in with a default password. And not only could I see what was going on there, but I could actually move all their cameras around as well. So I was actually in control of their camera system. Now, if their security on their surveillance system is so bad, it's probably so bad everywhere else as well. So what I did the first time was I turned all the cameras to look at the ceiling because I thought their security people will notice this and they'll fix it. And then I forgot about it. About a week later, I tried it again, and all the cameras were fixed. They were pointing in the right direction, but I could still get in. So I pointed them all at the ceiling again, And I wrote them an email, and I said, you have a serious problem with your security. You need to change the default passwords. And while you're at it, do a bit of an audit and fix your security. Forgot about it again. About 3 months later, I was doing some security training, and I thought, let me quickly go in live. And sure as anything, I went right in again, and I pointed all their cameras at the ceiling again. So then I wrote them a strongly worded message. I sent them an email again to say, really, you've got to fix your stuff. This was about a year ago, I think. A week ago, I went in again, and it's still not fixed. So we're sending them emails illustrating the point, and they just don't get it or they don't care. Now, that might not be that important for them, but I'm sure they've got other systems in place, and it shows you that they are lax with security. It makes them a wonderful target. Okay, so there's a real example. And I keep explaining a little bit more of security psychology in this new age, because part of the message that I want you to get today is to think differently about things. You must question what we did yesterday doesn't count anymore in future. So one of the attacks that's quite successful is pornographic-related messages. So what happens is that a lot of people these days look at pornography because they believe they can do so anonymously. Okay, it's something that has changed. You don't have to go to a shop and worry and people see you walking in. You can just log in the privacy of your own home. So how this attack works is it preys on people having a guilty conscience. So you're sitting at work and you get this message that's coming in that says on your work email address, thank you for subscribing to this pornographic channel. Thank you for that. And you are thinking, I know they have male content scanning at work. Everybody has just seen that I've done this now. And then very helpfully, in the bottom of the email, there's an unsubscribe button. And when you hit that unsubscribe button, it actually prompts you because it's running a program, and it says you're going to load this content now. But you're so panicky because you want to get this message away and you want to unsubscribe. You just say yes, 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 and you install the malware on your own machine. You think this doesn't happen? I guarantee you it does. Okay. They are using psychology, and they're using it in a way to attack organizations and get in. It's not necessarily the engineers that are going to be attacked in the organization. We're going to get to that in a second. We have other avenues of attack, and we saw this with the Ashley Madison hack. So this was one of those where hacktivists saw something that was happening in the world and said, this is not right. I'm not only going to interrupt their service, I'm going to burn all these people that are being so immoral by using this service. I'm not making a judgment call here, I'm saying how it happens. So what this website is about is that this is a place where married people can connect with each other in order to have an affair. So you can understand why the hacktivists took offense to that. So when this was exposed, so they broke into the system, they exposed all the usernames, passwords, names, details of all the people that were users of this site. So when it first happened, a lot of us had a pretty good laugh about this. You're thinking, these suckers that got caught, it's actually pretty funny. If it's not you, it's pretty funny. So I also had a laugh about it for a short while. And then we started thinking about the security implications in the customer base that we have. Now, one of the things that happens is that people associate a username with a specific password, and they use that quite frequently. Okay, so because you're asked for usernames and passwords the whole time, you tend to have one password that you use with a specific username, like an email address, for example. And quite often, your username is your email address on websites. That's how you tell the difference. So on this site now, by publishing those passwords and usernames, you could go through that and you could see where did people use work email addresses. And some of these were large organizations, government organizations. You could see exactly where were their work email addresses. And 10 to 1, they used their work password along with that work email address, which has actually created a significant security problem for that organization now. Just think about that for a second. You can see how that could have happened. So all of a sudden now, information security officers had to have very awkward conversations at work, is to say, I know you were trying to have an affair, but you have to change your password now because you've been compromised. Okay, but that is the residual impact of people making their own single sign-on systems to make life convenient for themselves, and they bring that problem into your workplace and it can actually put you out of business, if you think about it that way. Again, the target inside an organization is not going to be the most clued up people in computers. It is probably going to be administrative or financial staff. You don't know what they are doing. If you look at the finance people in any organization, you try not to talk to them that much. They're the people that are still busy at 8 o'clock at night when we all have gone home already. You know, they're doing something there to do with month-end runs or whatever. You know, no one really wants to get involved in that kind of stuff, okay? When they take a break and they're sitting on that computer with all the bank accounts and all the invoices and all the supply information, do you think they browse work-related things when they are taking a break on that computer? No, of course not. When they're taking a break, they're going to be doing some other browsing. You know, and again, I'm just saying that these are the kind of things you've got to understand, because that is where an attack could come from. It could be an email coming in that they react to. We recently had such an attack inside our own organization that nearly affected our CEO and our CFO. Fortunately, they are very wary of this, but it's called a spear phishing attack. So somebody had registered a domain. The company name is Law Trust. So they registered a domain called lawtrust.co. Not lawtrust.co.za, just lawtrust.co. And from this, they faked an email that came from our CEO, and they sent it to one of our payment staff, and they said, quickly release a payment to this organization. Now, if the CEO tells you to quickly release a payment to the organization, the temptation is, you know, you've probably got to do this. Fortunately, in our world, things don't work like that. There has to be a digitally signed form that says you may release this money. And because the process is quick and easy, a digitally signed form can be signed with your phone, we actually follow the process because it doesn't delay anything. So this payment official actually didn't have the form. She then spoke to the CFO that said, no matter what, you've got to follow the governance and get the signed form first. And then it came out that this was actually a spear phishing attack. So these things actually happen, you know. In your organization, would that have worked? Just think about that. It's quite frightening, actually. I mentioned data integrity earlier, and I just want to point out, so I'm starting to wrap up now. So I want to point out a little bit of data integrity issues, you know. So we rely so much on data. It's actually a surprise to us sometimes when things come out wrong. Now, this is in a different language, but what happened over here is this individual applied for an ID book in South Africa, and her name has got a little dash on the I. So in the Afrikaans language, she wrote there, when she filled in the application form, she said, look at the stripe on the I. She actually wrote it on the form. In Afrikaans, that is, let op na streepie op I. She said, look at the stripe on the I. When they did data capture, they actually captured that whole sentence, and that became her name. So from being a little bit cautious, she actually went to very upset about this. Now, this is an innocent example, but you see serious examples as well, because quite often we put all our attention in protecting the wrong place. The world's most expensive safe door put on a bank vault. It was quite a giggle when they were breached through the back wall, because that was the softest part. You know, so I'm trying to illustrate here, thinking about these things. So I need to wrap up. As I say, this could be 40 lectures around this topic, and it really gets more interesting as we go. But I want to show you a little bit of how we use artificial intelligence and deep learning in our own business and how it solved the problem for us. So we work in electronic signatures, you know, and we're getting rid of pieces of paper. And there's places where you need originals. You've got to print, you've got to sign original pieces of paper, you've got to courier them. It's expensive, it wastes time. Or you've got the typical engineering one. You need something approved in a project, so you start electronically, print it out, sign it, scan it, email it. And then the next person prints it out, signs it, scans it, email it. We all know the story. That's what we do in our projects. People have their printers set on draft mode to save money, and you deteriorate the copy totally, and eventually no one can see what's going on anymore, but they still sign anyway because everybody else signed. So this kind of is the world that we play in. So we use digital signatures, which is not a picture of a signature, because that is that man's signature that I've got over there. A real signature involves intent, authentication, a timestamp, and it must be tamper-proof. So we use crypto-based technology for this. And I want to show you the result of a signed PDF like that one. You can see Adobe Reader even recognizes that this has got this digital signature associated with it, and it says all the signatures are fine. If you hack a document like that, which I did with a programming tool, Adobe Free Reader will tell you that this document is not fine, it's been altered. So this is a world where we operate and we provide solutions to companies in this area. And it looks like this. You know, we use mobile phones, we use browsers, we show people there's documents, project change, management, whatever that's waiting for you to sign. We can build various workflows, and you can actually very easily sign it off on your mobile phone. I can show you after the speak how it works. But one of the things that we struggle with is that we have different types of signatures. And in order for a signature to be reliable and publicly verifiable by something like the free Adobe Reader, you have to belong to a public trust program, which means that we have to apply governance to the onboarding process for signatures itself. So we need an auditable registration process to give you the technology so that you can sign. That is one way to sign, but it's the best way to do it. But the problem it created for us in our business is if we want this to be ubiquitous and scalable, how do we do that auditable registration process with customers who are not with us? You know, how do we reach that far? So what we started doing was started making use of biometric technology, face recognition specifically, and machine learning, deep learning, in order to scan an ID, take a selfie, make sure the person's alive, that they're not just showing us a picture, and then register them for the system. And it really looks like this. We would scan the ID, we would OCR the ID, so we'd recognize the text on this thing, again using machine learning in that to make it accurate. We would check the selfie, check the liveness. I'll show you the liveness now, and you'd enroll somebody for the system. So there you can see the ID. You can see that we put a lot of emphasis in people doing things wrong, because it's unbelievable. If you put a text box there, I think people purposefully will write outside the box, just to show you that they are individuals, you know. So you've got to be able to recognize these things when people write sideways instead of on the line that they're supposed to. So a lot of effort goes into that to get that right, to orientate the writing correctly, to scan. I'm going to show you the face capture and the liveness check. So a very interesting, novel way to do a liveness check. You follow the dot with your eyes. And people can't help doing it. So where you have things which say something or wink, what I found out quite quickly is probably a third of people can't wink with one eye. It's the funniest thing to watch. You say wink with one eye, and they just can't do it. They just can't do it, you know. So this is a great, easy way to do that. And then finally, you can actually go and enroll the person on the system. So this is something where we use this kind of technology for ourselves. And it can be used in any other kind of industry as well, which has been a great business benefit to us, even in your own industry, to use people, to enroll people. Now, what made the magic happen for us is that face recognition was never that good because of the lighting conditions. You know, if somebody is sitting in an office, they're looking down to take the selfie, and there's a light above them, then their whole face is in shadow. Then we still have different skin complexions as well to deal with, so it just didn't work that well. So now, with the advances in technology, we can give real-time prompts to somebody to say, look up, look towards the light, so they lift up the phone. We can use deep learning, so we're not restricted to the traditional measurements, certain measurements on the face. We can actually look really at a whole face and make sure that it's the same face. And where the technology now is that it's even starting to look after your privacy. So while you're looking at your phone, the text will show for you. The second you look away, it's going to go fuzzy, so that somebody can't look over your shoulder. So this technology is turning into real-time authentication. It's authentication that is always on, cannot be broken. Now again, I want to summarize this talk by just saying this evolution that I try to illustrate to you is happening every day. And there's no surprises in store for you as long as you are viewing the world the right way and asking questions. And I thank you for your attention, and I hope this has given you something to think about.
On behalf of ICSA, I would like to thank Mason, but let's just take a note of positive identity. By now, I'm sure you're expert in the fourth industrial revolution, and you figured out my name. bunch of us are engineers, and we do what engineers do. But the fourth industrial revolution is kind of around us. The fourth industrial revolution is kind of around us, and yet we are not taking the full advantage of that. Let me give you an example. I'm a mechanical engineer, but I'm an associated member of IC as well. In mechanical engineering, we say we can solve any problem. Just give me a hammer. And if that hammer doesn't work, just bring me a bigger hammer, and I'll fix it. And the way how we pour concrete for the last 100 years plus, has it changed much? No, hasn't changed much. And actually, if we want to change it, somebody will come and say, oh, it's not to the spec, you can't change it. And yet, the fourth industrial revolution is marching on, and we need to catch up. And on that note, I would like to start with the questions and answer session. And my first question for Mason is, Mason, please tell me, what are the next lot of numbers? Because I would like to just kind of shortcut it in my career.
You're not suggesting we break in and have a look, are you?
No. Just read the future, please, for us. Anyway, I'm opening for questions and answers. And thank you, Mason, for inciting information and exciting as well, because there is a lot of good things, but there is a lot of scary things, and we need to balance them both. Yep. Thanks a lot. Any questions?
Otherwise, we're welcome to speak casually afterwards. I'm happy for emails as well.
You probably realize I'm part of the older generation.
I never would have said so.
And I see people every day who've never used computers, don't have smartphones. What on earth are they going to do? They can't rely on their grandchildren all the time.
I'd hazard a guess that you're seeing them less and less, though. So just
yes, you're right, they're dying off, but but there are still a lot of people left, though.
I don't really have an answer for you there, but on a previous board on which I sat, probably 3 of the individuals that are on the board were over 65 years old. And it was quite interesting for me to see those were the first 3 individuals that gave up their laptops and they only had iPads. So definitely it goes to that view of the world. It's important for us in the business side to be cognizant of this, and you have to be interested in this to survive.
Hi, Mason. Could you just talk a bit about AI and when it's going to reach human-level cognition and surpass it? Thanks.
So there's a couple of different views in this area. I'm of the opinion still that artificial intelligence is really impressive if-then-else statements based on huge data sets. I know I'm not doing the whole field justice there when I say that, but I don't really believe we have to worry too much about that for the foreseeable future. Again, I think the individual's instinct for self-preservation is real, and we will take steps not to design systems that can wipe out humanity. We've seen the movies, we've seen the consequences. I think machine learning is a fantastic tool, especially when you start adding that with visuals and optics, which can go into dangerous places and make decisions and things like that for you. But I think we don't have to quite worry about systems taking over the world and really deciding that humanity is a threat to humanity and we need to get rid of them. I don't quite think we're there yet. Thanks.
Do we have any other questions? If not, just a note for everyone, please, there is attendance register. This event is going to be registered for CPD points, and please enter your names in attendance register. On that note, thank you very much. Mason, thank you, and our event is closed.
Thanks.
Thanks a lot.